Sarah had always defined herself by her roles: wife to David, mother to Emily and Ethan. For 15 years, she poured her heart into creating a comfortable home in their Charlotte suburb. David's career as a successful lawyer provided a stable income, allowing Sarah to focus on raising their children. She'd never worried about finances, trusting David to handle everything. But the carefully constructed facade crumbled when David announced he was leaving. The words, "I'm not happy anymore," echoed in the sterile silence of their living room, leaving Sarah feeling like the rug had been pulled out from under her. The divorce proceedings were a blur of legal jargon and painful negotiations. Sarah, who had no personal income, was suddenly faced with the daunting task of rebuilding her life from scratch. The settlement, while providing some support, was a stark reminder that she needed to become financially independent. Fear gnawed at her. She'd never managed a budget, never balanced a checkbook. The prospect of navigating the world of finances alone felt overwhelming. A vast and uncharted territory she was now forced to explore. The comfortable life she had known was over, and the uncertain future stretched before her, a daunting and unknown path. The first step, her lawyer advised, was to create a budget. The word itself felt foreign to Sarah. She'd always had what she needed, never having to track expenses or worry about where the money was going. Now, staring at a blank spreadsheet, she felt a wave of panic. Where did she even begin? She started with the basics: housing costs, utilities, groceries. Then came the harder part: estimating expenses for things she'd never paid attention to before, like gas, car insurance, and clothing. Sarah turned to the internet, searching for budgeting for beginners. She discovered a wealth of resources, from online budgeting tools to simple templates. She learned about the 50/30/20 rule, allocating 50% of income to needs, 30% to wants, and 20% to savings and debt repayment. It seemed simple enough in theory, but applying it to her own life felt like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Her income was limited, and her expenses were high, especially with the children's needs. She realized she would have to make some difficult choices and cut back on non-essentials. Armed with her newly created budget, Sarah began tracking her spending. Every receipt, every online purchase was meticulously recorded. It was a tedious process, but it quickly became an eye-opener. She was shocked to see how much she spent on things she didn't even remember buying. Small, seemingly insignificant purchases added up quickly, draining her limited resources. The daily coffee runs, the impulse buys at the grocery store, the occasional takeout meals, they all contributed to a significant drain on her finances. The reality of her financial situation hit hard. She had to make changes, and drastic ones at that. The thought of giving up some of her small luxuries felt like a sacrifice, but she knew it was necessary. She started brewing her own coffee at home, packed lunches for herself and the children, and began meal planning to avoid impulse purchases at the grocery store. These small changes, while challenging at first, started to make a difference. She began to see where her money was actually going, and more importantly, where she could save. The control she was gaining over her finances, however small, gave her a sense of empowerment she hadn't felt in a long time. Sarah discovered a whole new world of saving money: couponing. At first, she felt a little embarrassed clipping coupons, a stark contrast to her previous life of carefree spending. But she quickly realized there was no shame in being resourceful. She started browsing online coupon websites, downloading store apps, and even joined a local couponing group on social media. She learned the tricks of the trade: stacking coupons, combining store sales with manufacturers' coupons, and using cashback apps. Meal planning became an art form. Sarah started experimenting with budget-friendly recipes, finding creative ways to use leftovers and stretch her grocery budget. She rediscovered the joy of cooking, involving Emily and Ethan in the process. They started having fun trying new dishes and even created their own family cookbook. These small changes not only saved money, but also brought them closer as a family. The kitchen, once a symbol of her previous life, was now a place of creativity, resourcefulness, and newfound connection. Looking around her house, Sarah realized she had accumulated a lot of things over the years, things she no longer needed or used. An old exercise bike gathering dust in the garage, designer handbags tucked away in the closet, and various pieces of furniture that no longer fit her style. She decided to declutter and sell these items online. She started with local online marketplaces, posting pictures and descriptions of the items she was selling. To her surprise, things started selling quickly. She made a decent amount of money from selling her unused belongings, providing a much-needed boost to her limited income. More importantly, it felt empowering to take control of her possessions and turn them into financial resources. The process of decluttering also had a positive effect on her mental state. Letting go of the past, both physically and emotionally, helped her move forward with a lighter heart and a clearer mind. The house, once filled with memories of her past life, began to feel like her own space, reflecting her new beginning. One of Sarah's biggest expenses was childcare. With both Emily and Ethan in school, she needed after-school care and summer programs. These costs were a significant drain on her budget. She explored different options, looking for affordable alternatives. She considered enrolling the children in community center programs, which were less expensive than private daycare centers. She also looked into after-school activities offered by the school district. Sarah also considered swapping childcare with other parents in her neighborhood. This would not only save money, but also create a support network for her and her children. She reached out to other moms at Emily and Ethan's school and found several who were also looking for childcare solutions. They formed a small group, taking turns watching each other's children after school. This arrangement proved to be a win-win situation, providing affordable childcare and building a sense of community. The shared responsibility eased the burden on everyone involved, and the children enjoyed spending time with their friends. Sarah knew that relying solely on the divorce settlement and selling her belongings wasn't a sustainable long-term solution. She needed to find a job. The thought filled her with both excitement and trepidation. She hadn't worked in 15 years, and her resume was outdated. She started by updating her resume, highlighting her transferable skills from her years as a stay-at-home mom: organization, time management, and problem-solving. She also took some online courses to brush up on her computer skills and learn new software programs. Sarah began searching for job openings online, focusing on part-time positions that would allow her to be home with her children after school. She applied for various roles, from administrative assistant to retail sales. The job search process was challenging, filled with rejections and unanswered applications. But Sarah remained persistent, reminding herself that every no brought her closer to a yes. She also started networking with other moms in her community, letting them know she was looking for work. Word of mouth proved to be a valuable resource, leading to several promising leads. Sarah finally landed a part-time job as an administrative assistant at a local real estate office. The hours were flexible, allowing her to work while her children were in school. The job wasn't glamorous, but it provided a steady income and a sense of purpose. It also forced her to become a master of time management. Juggling work, parenting, and household chores required careful planning and organization. Sarah created a strict schedule for herself, allocating specific times for work, school pickups, homework, dinner preparation, and household tasks. She learned to prioritize and delegate, asking Emily and Ethan to help with age-appropriate chores. She also learned to say no to things that weren't essential, focusing on what truly mattered. Though some days felt overwhelming, Sarah found a rhythm and began to thrive in her new routine. The feeling of contributing financially to her household gave her a renewed sense of confidence and independence. As Sarah navigated her new life as a working single mother, she realized the importance of having a strong support network. She relied on her family and friends for emotional support and practical. Her parents, who lived nearby, were a constant source of encouragement and help with childcare when needed. She also reconnected with some old friends who offered a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. Sarah also found support within her community. She joined a support group for single mothers, where she connected with other women who were going through similar experiences. Sharing her struggles and triumphs with others who understood what she was going through was incredibly helpful. She also found a sense of community at her church, where she volunteered with various activities. The connection she made through these activities provided a sense of belonging and helped her feel less alone. Building a support network proved to be crucial for Sarah's emotional well-being and her ability to navigate the challenges of her new life. Just as Sarah was starting to feel more secure in her new life, a letter arrived that would change everything. It was from a lawyer's office, informing her that a distant relative she'd never met had passed away and left her a small inheritance. The news was a welcome surprise, a financial cushion that could help her pay off some debts and build a small emergency fund. However, the joy was short-lived. Buried within the legal documents was a shocking revelation. The relative had also left behind a significant amount of debt, and Sarah, as the sole beneficiary, was now responsible for it. The amount was staggering, far more than the value of the inheritance itself. Sarah felt a wave of panic. How could this be happening? She consulted with her lawyer, who confirmed the devastating news. The inheritance was now entangled in a complex legal battle with creditors, and Sarah's own finances were at risk. The unexpected windfall had turned into a potential financial disaster, threatening to undo all the progress she had made. The stability she had worked so hard to achieve was once again hanging by a thread. As Sarah grappled with the inheritance debacle, a strange series of events began to unfold. She started receiving anonymous gifts, a grocery store gift card, a prepaid gas card, even a new set of tires for her car. At first, she was grateful, assuming it was a kind gesture from a friend or family member. But as the gifts continued, she became uneasy. There were no notes, no explanations, just anonymous acts of kindness. Then, things took a darker turn. She received a cryptic phone call, a distorted voice whispering her name before hanging up. She started noticing a dark car parked across the street from her house, its driver always obscured by the tinted windows. Fear began to creep in. Was this connected to the inheritance? Was someone trying to help her, or were these acts of intimidation? The sense of being watched, of being targeted, grew stronger each day, turning her newfound stability into a constant state of anxiety. She felt like she was being played in some twisted game, the rules of which she didn't understand. Just as Sarah was trying to unravel the mystery of the anonymous gifts and the threatening calls, her ex-husband, David, reappeared in her life. He claimed he wanted to be more involved in the children's lives, but Sarah sensed there was more to his sudden return than met the eye. He seemed unusually interested in her finances, asking pointed questions about the inheritance and her current financial situation. Sarah's suspicions grew when she overheard David on a phone call, his voice hushed and secretive. He was talking about money, about legal documents, about getting what was rightfully his. Could David be involved in the inheritance mess? Was he behind the anonymous gifts and the threatening calls? The thought sent a chill down her spine. She had trusted him once, and he had broken that trust. Could he be capable of manipulating her again, this time for financial gain? The reappearance of her ex-husband, coupled with the mysterious events surrounding her, created a web of suspicion and fear that threatened to consume her. Sarah decided to confide in her lawyer about the anonymous gifts, the threatening calls, and David's suspicious behavior. Her lawyer listened intently, his expression growing increasingly concerned. He advised her to document everything, to keep a record of the gifts, the calls, and any interactions with David. He also warned her that the inheritance situation was more complicated than they initially thought. There were rumors of other potential heirs, distant relatives who might contest the will. He also mentioned that some of the creditors pursuing the debt were known for their aggressive tactics. The lawyer urged Sarah to be cautious, to avoid any direct contact with these individuals. The conversation left Sarah feeling more anxious than ever. The mystery surrounding the inheritance had deepened, and the potential threats to her safety and financial stability had multiplied. She felt like she was trapped in a dangerous game, surrounded by unseen enemies and hidden agendas. The safe and stable life she had been building was crumbling around her once again. Sarah's sense of unease intensified in the following days. She started taking extra precautions, locking her doors and windows, and being more vigilant about her surroundings. One evening, as she was walking home from work, she noticed a shadowy figure following her. She quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest. The figure matched the description of the man she had seen lurking near her house. She broke into a run, her breath catching in her throat. She managed to reach her house and lock the door just as the figure reached her porch. She peered through the peephole, her hands trembling. The figure stood there for a moment, then turned and disappeared into the darkness. The close call left her shaken and terrified. She realized that the threat was real, that someone was actively trying to intimidate her. She knew she had to take action to protect herself and her children. The feeling of being hunted had become a terrifying reality. Driven by fear and desperation, Sarah decided to confront David. She arranged to meet him at a public place, a busy coffee shop. She laid out her suspicions, telling him about the anonymous gifts, the threatening calls, and the shadowy figure. David denied any involvement, his expression a mixture of feigned innocence and indignation. But Sarah wasn't convinced. She pressed him further, demanding to know what he knew about the inheritance and the creditors. Finally, David's facade cracked. He admitted to knowing more than he had let on. He revealed that he had been in contact with one of the creditors, a shady individual with a reputation for strong-arm tactics. He claimed he was trying to protect Sarah, to negotiate a better deal for her. But Sarah saw through his lies. She realized that David was not trying to protect her. He was trying to manipulate her, to use her financial situation to his advantage. In a moment of clarity, she understood that David's reappearance in her life was not about his children. It was about the money. He was entangled in the inheritance mess and was willing to do whatever it took to get what he wanted. This revelation solidified her resolve to protect herself and her children from his manipulations. Desperate for answers and feeling increasingly unsafe, Sarah decided to take her lawyer's advice and contacted a private investigator. The investigator, a seasoned professional named Mr. Johnson, listened carefully to her story, taking detailed notes. He agreed to take on the case, promising to delve into the inheritance situation, the creditors, and David's involvement. Mr. Johnson also advised Sarah to be extremely cautious and to avoid any contact with David unless absolutely necessary. As Mr. Johnson began his investigation, Sarah found an unexpected ally in her former neighbor, Mrs. Davison. Mrs. Davison, a sharp and observant woman, had noticed the strange occurrences around Sarah's house and offered her support. She even admitted to seeing David meeting with a suspicious-looking man on several occasions. This information corroborated Sarah's suspicions and strengthened her resolve to uncover the truth. The alliance with Mrs. Davison provided a much-needed sense of support and gave Sarah hope that she wasn't alone in this dangerous game. Mr. Johnson's investigation began to yield results. He discovered that the creditor David was in contact with was indeed a dangerous individual with connections to organized crime. He also uncovered a complex web of financial transactions, suggesting that the debt associated with the inheritance was not as straightforward as it seemed. There were indications of fraud and manipulation, hinting at a larger scheme at play. The most shocking discovery was that the distant relative who had left Sarah the inheritance had been involved in some shady business dealings before his. It appeared he had borrowed a significant amount of money from the criminal organization, and the debt Sarah had inherited was a result of those dealings. This revelation cast a new light on the entire situation, transforming it from a simple inheritance dispute into a potentially dangerous entanglement with criminal elements. Sarah realized she was in far deeper than she had ever imagined. Armed with the information from Mr. Johnson, Sarah decided to confront David one last time. She met him at the same coffee shop, this time with Mr. Johnson discreetly observing from a distance. She presented David with the evidence of his involvement with the criminal organization and his attempts to manipulate her. David, realizing he had been exposed, became agitated and threatening. The conversation escalated quickly, turning into a heated argument. Suddenly, two men entered the coffee shop, men Sarah recognized as associates of the dangerous creditor. They approached David and Sarah, their expressions menacing. The situation turned deadly in an instant. A struggle ensued, and one of the men pulled out a gun. In the ensuing chaos, Sarah managed to escape, fleeing the coffee shop and running for her life. The confrontation had taken a terrifying turn, confirming the danger she was in and forcing her to make a desperate escape. She knew she had to protect herself and her children at all costs. Sarah, terrified and shaken from the near-fatal confrontation at the coffee shop, knew she couldn't stay in her home. She was being hunted, and her children were in danger. She contacted Mr. Johnson, who arranged for a safe house, a secluded location where she and her children could hide until the situation was resolved. They packed quickly, taking only the essentials, and left their home under the cover of darkness. The feeling of being a fugitive, of constantly looking over her shoulder, was terrifying, but Sarah knew she had to stay strong for her children. The safe house was a small, unassuming cabin in a remote area. It was far from luxurious, but it offered privacy and security. Sarah and her children spent their days in hiding, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy despite the fear and uncertainty. They played games, read books, and tried to keep their spirits up, but the constant threat of being discovered loomed over them, casting a shadow on their temporary refuge. The isolation and fear began to take a toll, but Sarah knew they had to stay hidden until Mr. Johnson could figure out a way to protect them. While Sarah and her children were in hiding, Mr. Johnson continued his investigation. He finally uncovered the final piece of the puzzle, the true motive behind the entire scheme. It turned out that the criminal organization wasn't just after the dead. They were after something else entirely, a valuable piece of property that had been secretly owned by Sarah's distant relative. The debt was just a smokescreen, a way to pressure Sarah into giving up the property. Armed with this information, Mr. Johnson devised a dangerous plan. He would arrange a meeting with the leader of the criminal organization, using himself as bait to draw them out. He would also alert the authorities, setting up a sting operation to apprehend the criminals and bring them to justice. It was a risky plan, but it was the only way to protect Sarah and her children and bring an end to the nightmare. The stakes were higher than ever, and the potential for danger was immense. The night of the sting operation arrived, thick with tension. Mr. Johnson, wearing a hidden wire, met with the leader of the criminal organization at a secluded warehouse. The conversation was tense, with veiled threats and veiled promises. As Mr. Johnson stalled for time, the police moved into position, surrounding the warehouse. The scene was set for a dramatic showdown. Suddenly, David appeared, seemingly having had a change of heart. He burst into the warehouse, confessing his involvement and attempting to warn Mr. Johnson. This unexpected intervention caused chaos, alerting the criminals to the presence of the police. A gunfight erupted, shattering the tense silence. The warehouse became a scene of pandemonium, with gunfire echoing through the air. In the midst of the chaos, Mr. Johnson managed to signal the police, who stormed the warehouse, apprehending the criminals and bringing the dangerous game to an end. The dramatic showdown had finally arrived, bringing the long and terrifying ordeal to a head. The aftermath of the sting operation was a whirlwind of police interviews, legal proceedings, and media attention. Sarah and her children were finally able to return home, but the experience had left its mark. The sense of security she had worked so hard to build had been shattered, and rebuilding trust would take time. David, facing legal consequences for his involvement, expressed remorse for his actions. Sarah, while still hurt and betrayed, recognized a glimmer of sincerity in his apology. The complex emotions of forgiveness and resentment warred within her. The property that had been the target of the criminal organization was finally secured, providing Sarah with a much-needed financial boost. But more importantly, the experience had taught her a valuable lesson about the importance of financial independence and self-reliance. She was no longer the naive woman who had relied on others for her financial security. She had faced adversity, stared danger in the face, and emerged stronger and more resilient. With the legal and criminal matters resolved, Sarah turned her attention to her finances. She worked closely with her lawyer and a financial advisor to manage the inheritance and secure her financial future. She learned about investing, saving, and budgeting, taking full control of her financial life. The fear and uncertainty she had once felt about finances were replaced with confidence and knowledge. Inspired by her experience, Sarah decided to pursue a new career path. She enrolled in online courses to become a financial advisor, wanting to help other women navigate the complexities of finances and achieve financial independence. She felt a strong desire to empower others, to prevent them from experiencing the same vulnerability she had felt. The difficult journey she had endured had led her to a new purpose, a way to use her experience to help others. As time passed, Sarah and her children began to heal from the trauma they had endured. The safe house, the fear, the constant threat, these memories began to fade, replaced by a sense of resilience and strength. Sarah's relationship with David remained strained but civil, focused on co-parenting their children. She began to rebuild her social life, reconnecting with friends and making new ones. She also started her new career as a financial advisor, finding fulfillment in helping other women achieve financial security. She shared her story with her clients, offering them not just financial advice, but also emotional support and encouragement. Her experiences had given her a unique perspective, allowing her to connect with her clients on a deeper level. The difficult journey had led her to a new beginning, a path filled with purpose and meaning. Years later, Sarah had transformed into a confident and successful financial advisor. She had built a thriving business, helping countless women achieve financial independence and take control of their lives. Her children had grown into strong and resilient young adults, having learned valuable lessons about perseverance and overcoming adversity. The scars of the past remained, but they served as a reminder of how far she had come. Sarah had not only rebuilt her life after divorce, she had built an even stronger foundation, one based on self-reliance, resilience, and a deep sense of purpose. She had faced fear, betrayal, and danger, and she had emerged victorious. Her journey, though difficult and painful, had ultimately led her to a future of strength, independence, and fulfillment. The stay-at-home mom from Charlotte had found her voice, her strength, and her purpose, transforming her life into a testament to the power of resilience and the pursuit of a better future. Years had passed since the dramatic events surrounding the inheritance and the criminal organization. Sarah had built a successful career, her children were thriving, and she had finally found a sense of peace and security. However, the past had a way of resurfacing in unexpected ways. One evening, Sarah received a cryptic phone call. The voice was distorted, just like the call she had received years ago, sending a chill down her spine. The voice whispered a single, chilling phrase. The property wasn't the target. The call triggered a cascade of unsettling events. Sarah started noticing familiar signs. A dark car parked near her office, fleeting glimpses of a shadowy figure in the distance. The fear she thought she had conquered returned with a vengeance. She contacted Mr. Johnson, who had remained a trusted friend and advisor over the years. They began to investigate, revisiting the events of the past, searching for any overlooked details. Then came the shocking revelation. Mr. Johnson discovered a hidden clause in the original will, a clause that had been deliberately obscured during the legal proceedings. The clause stated that the inheritance, including the property, would only pass to Sarah if she remained unmarried and childless. If she married or had more children, the inheritance would revert to a secondary beneficiary, a beneficiary who had remained hidden until now. The twist was devastating. It turned out the true target all along was not the property itself, but Sarah's future, her happiness, her ability to build a new life with someone else. The secondary beneficiary was revealed to be a distant relative, a deeply resentful individual who had always felt entitled to the family fortune. This relative had orchestrated the entire scheme, manipulating the criminal organization and even influencing David's actions, all to prevent Sarah from enjoying her inheritance and finding happiness. The realization was a gut punch. The danger hadn't been external. It had been lurking within the family all along, a hidden enemy driven by envy and greed. The years of peace and security had been a fragile illusion, and now, the shadow of the past had returned, more menacing than ever, threatening to destroy everything Sarah had rebuilt. The final battle was about to begin, a battle not for money or property, but for Sarah's very right to a future.